the Presidents of the United States. 1. George Washington, 1789–1797. As the first U.S. President, Washington focused on establishing the new nation's government, maintaining neutrality in foreign affairs, and creating the first presidential cabinet. His administration set numerous precedents that would shape the future of the presidency. 2. John Adams, 1797–1801. Adams' presidency was marked by the Exes affair and the Quasi-War with France. Despite tensions, Adams managed to avoid a full-scale war. His administration faced controversy with the Alien and Sedition Acts, which were perceived as limiting civil liberties. 3. Thomas Jefferson, 1801–1809. Jefferson's presidency is known for the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the United States, and the Lewis and Clark expedition. He also enacted the unpopular Embargo Act of 1807, which aimed to protect American interests, but harmed the economy. 4. James Madison, 1809–1817. Madison led the country during the War of 1812 against Great Britain. His administration also saw the establishment of the Second Bank of the United States and the passage of the controversial Non-Intercourse Act. 5. James Monroe, 1817–1825. Monroe's presidency, known as the Era of Good Feelings, was characterized by a sense of national unity. His administration achieved the Missouri Compromise and introduced the Monroe Doctrine, which asserted American influence in the Western Hemisphere. 6. John Quincy Adams, 1825–1829. Adams faced criticism for his alleged corrupt bargain with Henry Clay. His administration focused on infrastructure development and education, but struggled to achieve much due to political opposition. 7. Andrew Jackson, 1829–1837. Jackson's presidency is known for the Indian Removal Act, which led to the forced relocation of Native Americans and the nullification crisis with South Carolina. He vetoed the renewal of the Second Bank of the United States and was a strong advocate for the common man. 8. Martin Van Buren, 1837–1841. Van Buren's presidency was marred by the Panic of 1837, an economic depression that lasted throughout his term. He supported the independent treasury system to address the nation's financial woes, but struggled to gain political traction. 9. William Henry Harrison, 1841. Harrison's presidency was cut short as he died just 32 days into his term. His brief tenure did not leave any lasting impact on the nation. 10. John Tyler, 1841–1845. Tyler's presidency was marked by the annexation of Texas and opposition to the National Bank. He faced significant opposition from his own party, the Whigs, who eventually expelled him. 11. James K. Polk, 1845–1849. Polk's administration saw the Mexican-American War and the acquisition of vast territories, including California and the Oregon Territory. His presidency was characterized by aggressive expansionism. 12. Zachary Taylor, 1849–1850. Taylor, a military hero, died just over a year into his term. He opposed the spread of slavery to new territories and attempted to avoid sectional conflicts. 13. Millard Fillmore, 1850–1853. Fillmore's presidency saw the passage of the Compromise of 1850, which aimed to ease tensions between pro- and anti-slavery factions but ultimately sowed further division. 14. Franklin Pierce, 1853–1857. Pierce's administration was marked by the controversial Kansas-Nebraska Act, which led to violence between pro- and anti-slavery settlers. He also pursued an expansionist foreign policy in Central America and the Caribbean. 15. James Buchanan, 1857–1861. Buchanan's presidency is often criticized for its failure to address the escalating issue of slavery and secession. The Dred Scott decision occurred during his term, which further exacerbated tensions between the North and South. Buchanan's inaction contributed to the secession of Southern states and the onset of the Civil War. 16. Abraham Lincoln, 1861–1865. Lincoln's presidency was dominated by the Civil War. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared the freedom of slaves in Confederate, held territories, and gave the famous Gettysburg Address. Lincoln was assassinated in 1865, just days after the Confederacy's surrender. 17. Andrew Johnson, 1865–1869. Johnson's presidency was marked by his opposition to radical Republican Reconstruction policies, leading to his impeachment by the House of Representatives. He narrowly escaped removal from office by one vote in the Senate. Johnson struggled to reunify the country after the Civil War. 18. Ulysses S. Grant, 1869–1877. Grant's presidency was characterized by Reconstruction efforts and focus on civil rights for African Americans. However, his administration was also marred by numerous scandals and allegations of corruption, which tarnished his legacy. 19. Rutherford B. Hayes, 1877–1881. Hayes's controversial election ended Reconstruction in the South, leading to the withdrawal of federal troops and the erosion of civil rights for African Americans. His administration sought civil service reform and focused on domestic issues. 20. James A. Garfield, 1881. Garfield was assassinated just 6 months into his term. During his brief presidency, he sought to reform the civil service and oppose the patronage system. 21. Chester A. Arthur, 1881–1885. Arthur's presidency saw the passage of the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act, which established merit-based selection for government positions. He also focused on tariff reform and immigration policy, including the controversial Chinese Exclusion Act. 22. Grover Cleveland, 1885–1889. Cleveland's first term was marked by his commitment to limited government, fiscal conservatism, and opposition to patronage. He also pursued tariff reform and vetoed numerous congressional bills he deemed wasteful. 23. Benjamin Harrison, 1889–1893. Harrison's presidency saw the passage of the Sherman Antitrust Act, aimed at curbing monopolistic practices, and the McKinley Tariff, which raised import duties to protect American industries. His administration also admitted 6 new states to the Union. 24. Grover Cleveland, 1893–1897. Cleveland's second term was marked by the Panic of 1893 and the subsequent economic depression. His administration faced labor unrest, such as the Pullman strike, and attempted to address the economic crisis by repealing the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. 25. William McKinley, 1897–1901. McKinley's presidency saw the Spanish-American War, which resulted in the U.S. acquiring Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. His administration also passed the Gold Standard Act, which established gold as the basis for U.S. currency. McKinley was assassinated in 1901. 26. Theodore Roosevelt, 1901–1909. Roosevelt's presidency focused on progressive policies, including trust-busting, conservation, and the Square Deal domestic program. He also pursued an assertive foreign policy, exemplified by the construction of the Panama Canal and the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. 27. William H. Taft, 1909–1913. Taft continued some of Roosevelt's progressive policies, such as trust-busting, but was more conservative in other areas. His administration saw the passage of the Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act and the Mann-Elkins Act, which increased the regulatory power of the Interstate Commerce Commission. 28. Woodrow Wilson, 1913–1921. Wilson's presidency was marked by progressive policies such as the Federal Reserve Act, the Clayton Antitrust Act, and the creation of the Federal Trade Commission. He led the country during World War I and was a key architect of the League of Nations, which the U.S. ultimately did not join due to opposition in the Senate. 29. Warren G. Harding, 1921–1923. Harding's administration saw the Teapot Dome scandal, one of the most significant political scandals in U.S. history, involving corruption in the leasing of federal oil reserves. Harding died in office, leaving his successor to address the fallout from the scandal. 30. Calvin Coolidge, 1923–1929. Coolidge's presidency was marked by a pro-business, small government philosophy, which included tax cuts and deregulation. His administration oversaw a period of economic prosperity known as the Roaring Twenties, but critics argue that these policies contributed to the Great Depression. 31. Herbert Hoover, 1929–1933. Hoover's presidency was defined by the onset of the Great Depression. His administration attempted to address the crisis through various measures. But they were largely unsuccessful, and he was criticized for his perceived inaction in the face of widespread suffering. 32. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933-1945. FDR's presidency was marked by the New Deal, a series of programs designed to address the Great Depression through relief, recovery, and reform. He also led the country through World War II, becoming the only president to be elected to 4 terms. He died in office in 1945. 33. Harry S. Truman, 1945-1953. Truman's presidency saw the end of World War, i.e., the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the beginning of the Cold War. His administration implemented the Marshall Plan, which helped rebuild Europe, and the Truman Doctrine, which aimed to contain the spread of communism. 34. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 1953-1961. Eisenhower's presidency was marked by a focus on containing communism and a middle of the road domestic policy. His administration saw the construction of the interstate highway system, the end of the Korean War, and the enforcement of desegregation in public schools with the Little Rock 9 incident. 35. John F. Kennedy, 1961-1963. Kennedy's brief presidency was marked by the Cuban Missile Crisis, the space race, and the initiation of the Peace Corps. His administration of the Peace Corps. His administration also pursued civil rights reforms and laid the groundwork for the eventual passage of the Civil Rights Act. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. 36. Lyndon B. Johnson, 1963-1969. Johnson's presidency focused on his Great Society program, which aimed to end poverty and racial injustice. His administration oversaw the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the creation of Medicare and Medicaid. Johnson also escalated U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, which led to widespread protest and unrest. 37. Richard Nixon, 1969-1974. Nixon's presidency is often overshadowed by the Watergate scandal, which led to his resignation. However, his administration achieved some significant accomplishments, such as the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, detente with the Soviet Union, and the opening of diplomatic relations with China. 38. Gerald Ford, 1974-1977. Ford's brief presidency was marked by his efforts to restore public trust in the government after the Watergate scandal. He controversially pardoned Nixon and faced economic challenges, including high inflation and unemployment. 39. Jimmy Carter, 1977-1981. Carter's presidency focused on human rights in foreign policy and energy conservation domestically. His administration achieved the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt, but faced the Iran hostage crisis and economic difficulties, such as high inflation and an energy crisis. 40. Ronald Reagan, 1981-1989. Reagan's presidency was marked by his Reaganomics policies, which included tax cuts, deregulation, and increased defense spending. His administration saw the end of the Cold War, the Iran-Contra affair, and the launch of the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI. 41. George H. W. Bush, 1989-1993. Bush's presidency was marked by the end of the Cold War, the Gulf War, and the negotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. His administration also faced an economic recession and public dissatisfaction with domestic issues. 42. Bill Clinton, 1993-2001. Clinton's presidency was characterized by economic growth, welfare reform, and the passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. His administration also faced several scandals, including the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which led to his impeachment by the House of Representatives. He was acquitted by the Senate. 43. George W. Bush, 2001-2009. Bush's presidency was marked by the September 11 attacks, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the passage of the Use of Patriot Act. His administration also faced criticism for its handling of Hurricane Katrina and the 2008 financial crisis. 44. Barack Obama, 2009-2017. Obama's presidency focused on healthcare reform with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, as well as the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act in response to the financial crisis. His administration also normalized relations with Cuba and signed the Paris Agreement on climate change. 45. Donald Trump, 2017-2021. Trump's presidency was marked by tax reform, deregulation, and a focus on conservative policies. His administration renegotiated trade agreements, such as the USMCA, and pursued an America First foreign policy. Trump was impeached twice by the House of Representatives, but acquitted both times by the Senate. His presidency ended with the COVID-19 pandemic and a contentious election. 46. Joe Biden, 2021 present. Biden's presidency has focused on addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, promoting infrastructure investment, and advancing social equity. His administration rejoined the Paris Agreement and has sought to rebuild international alliances.